Hey Sean,
Hey
welcome.
everybody. Sorry I'm late.
Not a problem. Not a problem at all. A minute late's not going to hurt anybody.
Just in time.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May 13th, 6 o'clock on May 13th. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Sandwich Board of Appeals. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Board of Appeals is comprised of 5 regular members and 1 alternate member. The Board of Appeals can have up to 4 alternate members. Any decision of this board requires a 2/3 vote. 2/3 of 5 is 4. If only 4 members vote, the vote would have to be unanimous. If 5 members vote, 1 member could dissent. This meeting is live and streamed on Sandwich Community Television's website and on local channel 9. The meeting is being recorded and will be available on the SCTV website at www.sandwichtv.org tomorrow. And we do have a young lady recording this meeting. Is anybody else recording this meeting? Okay, so there. All right. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of April 22nd?
So moved.
No second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The only item on the agenda tonight is old business, number 24-15, Village Green, comprehensive permit, -NSG Village Green-1 LLC. Attending the meeting with us, we welcome Amy Questle, Town Council, Ian Reed, who's the Building Commissioner, and Sean Reardon, who's the Tetra Tech engineer. And by Zoom, we have Will Downey from Barrett Planning. The public hearing remains open. One other comment, Chase Terrio missed the meeting on April 8th, 2025. However, he has listened to the audio of the meeting, reviewed the meeting materials, and has signed an affidavit to this effect. We were in receipt of 2 letters from town members. One from Christine Dennis, dated May 7th, 2025, and one from Don Clay, dated May 9th, 2025. They were included in your packet. Did everybody confirm that they got them and read them?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Tonight, again, the peer review continues to be ongoing. Sean from Tetra Tech is here, and he's going to have a summary of where he stands on what has been submitted. We have 2 comment memos. Okay, the first one is from Andrew Mandel, Sandwich Fire Department. Thank you again for clarifying the issues I had with 85 Route 6A. Below is the comment for the Village Green project, as we discussed as well. The Sandwich Fire Department advises that any development, use, or modification of this parcel of property within the town of Sandwich must comply with all applicable fire and life safety codes as set forth by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. This includes, but is not limited to, adherence to the Massachusetts Fire Code 527 CMR, State Building Code 780 CMR, and any local ordinances or regulations adopted by the town of Sandwich. A review and approval by the Sandwich Fire Department will be required to ensure compliance with fire protection systems, emergency access, and life safety requirements. All right, another one is from J.J. Burke, Chief. Andrew said something. Number 1, he states, I am not a fan of underground parking garages, and if they would be put in, they would need the following. A, 2 ways in and out, not 1 entrance/exit. B, fire suppression system. C, flood control measures to evacuate water, especially sloped underground parking entrances. And D, concern about EV fires in underground garages with limited ventilation. These are just a few of my concerns with underground parking, but if those measures can be addressed adequately, then we can have a good plan for it and move forward. All right. There's no more comment letters. I'm going to just turn it over to Leanne to just kind of summarize where we are and where we're going.
So since our last meeting, we've not received an updated plan set. Sean Reardon has provided comments on the last plan set that the board discussed in April. We did receive amended requests for waivers and local regulations from Attorney Fitch, who can speak to those, and then an expanded statement on the recreational areas. So I think one of just the outstanding points tonight is whether or not the plan will be revised to update or remove the recreational areas from the plan, or whether they're going to continue to move forward with the plan that we discussed in April, which was dated March 24th.
Okay. Sean, I think we're just going to let you lead off rather than read your letter. Sure. If you don't mind just kind of summarizing what is still outstanding in your mind and what needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I think the good news is from a technical standpoint, I think Deb's done a good job of sort of proving that what they're showing is permittable. So in other words, they can design a system that meets stormwater standards. They can do things in a way that protects the abutters. The problem is a lot of the submittals lack the details to prove that. So although, in my experience, I think they can get there, they haven't demonstrated that yet. Now, fortunately, this is 40B project, so this is just a preliminary plan approval. So there's always an option for, if the board chose to approve a project, to require a future submittal that sort of captures all of that information and provides all that information. That's not too atypical, that we're at this stage, we lay out all the big things. Usually there's more detail and there's more clear sort of documentation as to what's in the project, what's out of the project. But in this case, I think from an engineering standpoint, it can work. I mean, we do have a lot of comments that need to be addressed, but those can also be addressed later on, but they need to be tracked and make sure that they do get addressed. Otherwise, they would be causing problems in the future. I think in my mind, my biggest question still is the solar facility. I probably have 15 solar projects that I'm designing right now, all in the 5 megawatt size. They're all 5 megawatts because that's kind of the cap for certain tax incentives. Typically, we'll say that'll power about 1,000 to 1,200 homes. So there's a disconnect there between what they're showing for the size of their facility and the representation they're making that it's only there to feed their facility. They did provide some documentation. It sort of laid out some sort of strained arithmetic to get there. I'm still of the mind that it's substantially larger than what it needs to be, and that it's intended to do something other than just feed the facility. Some of the missing things, like for example, usually a landscape plan is a big part of a 40B project, because when you're doing a 40B project, you're getting all sorts of latitude under zoning where you're reducing setbacks, you're reducing frontage requirements, things like that. So typically, to mitigate that, you have to have a nice landscape plan, because that's usually how you protect the neighbors. In this case, from day one, it seems like the landscape plan has just sort of been an afterthought. Again, this is something that could get pushed to a final design. It would certainly be nice to have a more informed design that was more thoughtful, but certainly something can be provided to you later and reviewed. And then I would suggest that if you did have a condition, it would put a lot of the onus on them to prove to you that their plan is good. So in other words, they can't just come in with a plan and just say, well, here's our plan. You should have the right to review it. You should have a professional review it. Make sure what they're proposing is hitting the mark and being responsible. Same with the lighting plan. Typically, we'll see a photometric plan. Lights will match all the other plans. This was just a sort of a collection of screenshots. It wasn't really a photometric plan. But again, the standards for photometrics are, you just don't want any light spill on adjacent properties. You want to make sure that your lights have all cut-off fixtures and things like that. So I have no doubt in my mind that a thoughtful lighting plan can be done, but it hasn't been provided yet. Then probably my last thing is, I don't know if you recall, but there was one of our initial comments was we asked for what's called a warrant analysis for the left turn lane into the site. So when you have a busy street like the road, that Falmouth Road there, sometimes you need to have a separate pocket so that cars that are taking a left into the site don't create traffic issues. So initially they hadn't proposed anything. We asked them to do the warrant analysis. The response came back sort of, yeah, it meets the warrants, but we don't really need it. Our response was, well, does it meet the warrants or does it not? And then sort of an old plan that got superimposed on the submittal got added on, but the answer never was given to us as to whether or not, well, is it required? The traffic consultant should say, yes, it's required, and here's a current design. So the design looks like a good left turn design, but it's from, I think, like 2014. So if the board thinks of approving a project like this, they're gonna have to condition that a final design get done and be implementable before I would suggest any building permit gets processed. One of the issues that we see on that plan is it encroaches on parcels on either side of the project. I understand that those parcels are under control of the same entity, but from my standpoint, they're not part of the project. So in order to do the left turn lane, and in order to achieve the site distances in either direction, you would need to encroach on the abutting parcels. So as it stands right now, the project is not implementable on the land that it controls. Aside from that, again, I think technically they can get there. I think from a planning standpoint, I think the last plan was a significant improvement over the prior one. So I'd hate to see us take a step back. But all we can do is review the March submittal, which has the pool, which has the playground, which has the walking trails. The only probably wonky thing from my standpoint is that one outlier building that's sort of towards the front of the entrance is really close to the property line of that parcel next to it. But as I understand it, that parcel belongs to the developer, so I'm a little less concerned about it in that stage. But that being said, that's probably the only comment I'd make on the layout of the facility. I thought it was pretty efficient. They addressed all of our prior comments, so from that standpoint, I think we're in pretty good shape.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fitch, do you have any comments, or would you like to speak to any of your submission?
Yes, we have a few things to add. I'm here with Deb Keller, and shall we take seats?
Sure, please do.
I appreciate Sean Reardon's comments, and I wanted to address the one issue that keeps recurring, and that is about the solar sizing, because it's I wouldn't call it necessarily an engineering type issue, but it is a business, it is an issue as to the size and the appropriateness. Sean has raised concerns that the 4.8 megawatt solar array proposed for this project may be oversized relative to the energy needs of the 144 residential unit development. Respectfully, we say this view is based on an incomplete understanding of the project's integrated energy and resilience systems, as well as an incorrect application of sizing norms for comprehensive renewable energy infrastructure serving the modern, all-electric, net zero ready community. To clarify, the solar field is not intended just to offset the typical residential load profiles that Sean refers to. Instead, it is designed to fulfill multiple tasks. First, as Sean references, the first task, support 100% electric residential community comprising approximately 120,000 square feet of conditioned space. But second, one of the tasks of this array would be to charge 54 level 3 EV stations. A third task would be to operate an advanced wastewater treatment system and vacuum sewer infrastructure 24/7. And fourth would be the task would be to charge a battery energy storage system that enables load shifting, resiliency, and peak demand softening for the microwave. So there are actually 4 features to any generation of electrical power. In this context, sizing for average load alone is not only insufficient, short-sighted, it would actually defeat the goal of creating a decentralized, resilient microgrid, which is our goal. Massachusetts policy specifically encourages forward-looking infrastructure that supports electrification, resiliency, and peak management. The 2050 decarbonization roadmap recommends oversizing solar in conjunction with storage to reduce the carbon emissions and strengthen the regional grid. The Cape Cod Commission's own energy and climate mitigation technical bulletins support development of renewable systems that exceed baseline on-site load, where it enables broader public benefits. Finally, from a lawyer's viewpoint, energy is infrastructure. The courts and the Housing Appeals Committee have consistently recognized and supported infrastructure within the 40B context. Mostly, of course, wastewater, but energy is infrastructure. And so also are transportation systems. Designing for resiliency and sustainability, now more possible than ever before, is as compelling as compliance with the stretch code. And you're probably familiar with that, where Sandwich has enacted or adopted the stretch code. Chapter 40B housing is entitled to the same technological advances as other housing. The applicant views energy infrastructure as a public benefit under Chapter 40B and is thus presumptively valid. Going back to the stretch code, in constructing your ordinary single-family house these days, the stretch code requires, I'm just familiar with a couple of the minimal requirements, conduit be completed in advance of energy on the roof. You may not be planning that yet, but if you build a house, you must include conduit from your box, from the electrical panel in your basement up to the attic. And you must include conduit from the front door of your house to the parking area to be ready for EV charging. Now, that is forward thinking. That's the law. There's no law related to what I just described with regard to energy, but our proposal is to include enough power to deal with EV stations and wastewater systems and all the energy that a home would use, and to keep the batteries full up. That's the idea of a microgrid. Also, please acknowledge, or please note, that the applicant has re-examined this issue after reviewing Sean's comments, and we have submitted our experts' document on the matter and reduced the energy production to 4.1 megawatts. And that should show on the plans. But that would be for a multi-purpose energy production. But again, on behalf of my client, the statement is that everything that is designed into this is intended for on-site use, and the actual existence of a microgrid. That's the position regarding the sizing that has been proposed. I've got with me Deb Keller, who you've spoken with earlier or before, regarding any comments on engineering issues as raised by Sean.
Thank you. Good evening. Deb Keller with Merrill Engineers. Thank you, Sean, for your peer review. And I just wanted to state that I am confident that, as Sean mentioned in his letter, that the remaining technical issues could be addressed through final design. and that the project currently can meet all local, state, and federal applicable regulations.
Can you tell me how tall these buildings are?
I don't have, unless it's on the
You still have a set
architectural.
of plans that does not provide the height of these buildings.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
The
I
height
said,
of
we
the
still
building.
have a design plan that fails to show the total height of the building. And it's been brought up before,
Really?
we still don't have it.
It's not noted in the table either, the zoning table.
The height of the building?
Correct.
I think it says 30 feet maybe to the top of the ceiling of the upper story, but doesn't
To the peak of
include, doesn't include the roof.
I will submit that to you. I will personally get that.
And the last time we were here, we had asked a question whether or not an engineer, your engineer, whoever you're using as a consultant on the electric solar field, would certify as to the various amount of, I guess, power or whatever that's to be generated and necessary for the residential use. And if you want to break it down into 3 components, that's fine, too, but we haven't seen that either.
And Jonathan, which plan are we going to be looking at?
It is the plan submitted in March
At the
of
last
this year, the
meeting?
most recent.
March 24th.
I think the revision date is March 24th.
So I do believe that at the previous meeting, we had discussed shifting as mentioned, the recreational areas. And it's my understanding that the applicant feels we could do that through a condition to make those adjustments to the site layout.
I think that's what he represented the last time we were here, including moving that other building to the other side. That question I have, I guess, maybe rather than, you can tell me whether or not the 31 parking spaces that are shown between these buildings on that March 24th plan could be moved to the location of the proposed building and the playground that's on that site, as well as the parking, so that you have a complete courtyard within the 6 buildings that you see there, and you move the playground, you move the other building that's close to the property line that Sean has referenced to the other side of the street.
The only response we can make to that, Kevin, is that the applicant considered everything that has been brought forward and has decided that these plans are the ones to be presented.
Okay.
If there is something like you described, you can address it with a condition
Okay,
at this point.
that's fine.
And if I could add, right now, Deb, how many, 60 spaces underneath the buildings?
Yes.
So the footprint of the space underneath the buildings can park a lot more than 60 vehicles, at least it looks to be. We don't have a layout of the below grade parking, so we don't know. So there's a possibility that there might be some additional space below the structures that could be used as well.
And I guess then we would have to come to grips with whether or not we want to see sufficient parking, 2 spaces per unit as
Right.
opposed to 1.5. In which event that parking would be on the other side of the street as well.
And there was, that particular issue was never resolved to any final determination. There was arguments, and then that's one of those decisions that you're gonna make, is what do you feel is essential for that? And if it should be moved other than what's shown on the most recent plans, that is your decision.
So you're proposing 291 spaces, but you didn't want to build 291, is that what I'm hearing? You have 144 units. If you had 2 spaces per unit, you're 288, right?
288, yeah.
I've never been very good at math, but, so you're showing 291. Are you showing 291 on this plan,
On the March,
on that plan?
I believe on the March 24th plan.
Including the ones that are below the building. So if you were physically to count the parking spaces that you see on the plans, it wouldn't add up to 200
Right.
anyway. There's
Because it's parking.
parking underneath the building.
60 underneath. Yeah.
Yes. And I think going to your comment before about reducing surface parking, once a garage plan is developed, we could maximize the number of spaces that go underground that would then alleviate some of that surface pavement and parking.
I don't know, can't recall off the top of my head, but does the parking underneath the building satisfy the condition that was raised by the fire department in their letter, multiple accesses and things of that nature?
It does not on this plan currently, but I did not see that comment until this evening, so I've made a note of it, and it would be one of the things that we would look into addressing.
It seemed to me to be difficult for those buildings in the middle to have accesses.
So, looking at it, I'm almost thinking of looping the garage, which might be a unique scenario, but we'll definitely loop at providing both entry and exit.
Yeah, and the nice thing about the garage doesn't have to share the same geometry as the buildings above it. So you have a lot of latitude in how it can be managed.
Any other members of the board have any questions for the applicant? Comments, questions?
Mr. Fitch, so just to clarify, you're going to provide more detail of how the load is going to be consumed on the property via whether it's the chargers, the wastewater system?
You want to break it down into 4 tasks?
Correct. Because I think your calculations assume 100% EV subscription for the facility?
Yes.
Which is a little bit of a stretch.
It's a stretch right now,
No, I
but
understand.
we don't know about tomorrow.
I understand
And the
that.
whole idea is, like I mentioned about the stretch code, I got no need for a conduit and the expense of doing that.
I understand that, but my point being that until you have that subscription, you are going to have a significant amount of excess capacity,
Correct.
which I assume you will be
Or
offloading.
the facility may not be built out at the outset.
So you're saying you might build the solar field in stages,
That's perfectly possible.
possible but not necessarily the case.
I don't know the answer.
Okay.
We could condition it.
Right.
We could condition that.
Exactly. I mean,
But we need the information.
we've made the representation on behalf of the applicant, and we believe that to be true. If that would lead to a condition that talks about a staged construction, that should be completely acceptable.
It's difficult to do that without the information that Jim is looking for.
Right. And even then, though, I don't think anybody knows the answers to these things. I've very little experience, but I've listened to these experts on this, and they're not exactly sure as to what does the battery use, how many EV stations will be operational or drawing power, or do people, when you get something this size, there are ranges. So nothing's going to be specific. I'm sure Sean's aware of that.
Yeah, if I could just add, so they have submitted documentation as to how much power the facility is projected to use, how much power the facility is projected to generate. So all of the information that they mentioned was counted in that, sort of how much they're projected to use. Even with all of these things, with two e-vehicles for every unit being charged fully every day, even with all that, they were still producing 3 times more power than they were using over the course of the year. Now, it was fairly, the information was fairly sort of scattered and disjointed, so it's hard to sort of, but I was able to pull this information out. It is, they can produce, they can just, to estimate how much power these arrays will produce, vary finely. So because they're the source of every revenue projection, every financing deal. So the beautiful thing about developing solar projects is it is pretty much guaranteed income in reliably so over the course of the year. And the models that they have are very efficient and very exact in how much energy they produce. For example, we even are charged with, like, we can't have utility poles in areas that will shade the panels because it reduces production, to the point where a single utility pole that casts shadow on a 5 megawatt array will end up at the end of a 20-year lease agreement will end up being worth $30,000 when you talk about the revenue that's going to generate over those 20 years. So there are models and systems that can tell you exactly how much this is going to produce, because it basically gets converted to dollars in a financing deal. I talked to my solar developers and I said, yep, it's being represented. We've got a 4.1 megawatt ground mounted solar array, 144 units, and their response was, no, that's not true, right? So, in our mind, yes, I don't want to argue. I like solar projects. I think it'd be great to have a 5 megawatt solar project, right? I don't want to make you think that's bad, but I don't like the fact that it's being projected as something that's sized for the purpose that it's clearly intended to do something else.
Quick question, Jonathan. Was the potential income generation by the solar power included in the pro forma that was submitted to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to determine, the profit on the project and the rents and that sort of thing?
I can't answer that question, I don't know. But it would have to be, to some extent. Well, it does, I mean,
You would hope so, but
the income from these kinds of projects are reviewed for the profit cap.
well, then if you provide it,
If this is being proposed as part of a 40B, it would be part of the income revenue, the revenue stream.
And I noted that in your letter, you said we weren't entitled to see the pro forma, but perhaps it might make sense that the information that was provided relative to the solar in the pro forma would be helpful to us in terms of any conditioning that we might look at.
I would also caution that there's nothing that I understand would prevent them from signing an agreement with an operator. So if the developer controls all the units and they control the homeowners association, they could very easily, as the homeowners association, enter into an agreement with an operator to run the facility, and then that operator would take the income. So it wouldn't necessarily make it to the books for the residential project.
I would respectfully disagree that anybody would think of getting away with something like that. That's clearly manipulative, and it looks pretty transparent to me. If I were a regulator, nobody would be getting away with that.
Well,
It's not that simple. This
so?
is being proposed under 40B. All the constraints on profits apply. That's my interpretation.
So will you provide that information from the pro forma to us? Relative
No,
to the
I will
solar?
provide the information on the loads for the different tasks.
You won't provide the revenue information?
I have no authority to do that, and revenue information is all speculative anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I have no authority to do that.
Okay.
I will, this is the 4 tasks which were broken down. That's a reasonable request. And the height of the building.
What about landscaping? I mean, I think Sean is correct that most of the landscaping that's been presented has been minimal. I think we would condition any permit that we grant upon providing a detailed landscape plan, which would screen abutting properties and the like.
This is the push and pull and the line that gets drawn with respect to 40B applications. It's supposed to be based on preliminary plans. And we have, our most recent filing has a couple of pages of landscape information. For you to condition the final plans to include more than what has been submitted is reasonable.
Mr. Chairman? May I?
Yes, please, Amy.
So we're going down a very, very dangerous path, in my opinion, because the applicant is asking us to design the project. And we are not under 40B. There's HAC case law that says that we cannot require an after-the-fact approval. So we cannot require that any landscaping plan has to be approved by this board. We would have to actually condition the landscaping plan on what we're going to add. I don't know about you, but I'm not a landscape architect. I can't do that. So it's a huge risk for the applicant to be taking, to have this board design their project. I would prefer to see a landscaping plan. I agree with Sean that it is very important in a 40B context because of the screening. Really, that's the reason why. Because of the screening, and then I think less so, for the recreational aspects, all those kind of things. But it's the screening that's very, very important. And then secondly, with regard to the solar, we have 4 so-called tasks. I would like more information on the 4th one, which is battery energy storage. So is that just going to be sold? The 4th task?
Battery storage?
Yep.
It's my understanding that's the battery that provides the resiliency on site.
And that
It has to be continually charged.
What's being stored in that battery is energy that's going to go back to the project?
That's the idea.
Grid.
That's the
And that's going to be conditioned, if that's the case.
But if the project doesn't use it, where does it go?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Goes to the grid, right?
That's what I'm asking.
no, the battery,
The question that I think he's asking is, so say you fill up the battery, you have all your uses addressed, now you have excess energy.
Right.
Where does that energy go? Is that,
I couldn't tell you, I don't know. I assume, really, it awaits.
It goes to the grid.
It's going to be sold back
It
to the
probably would go to, it's silly that it would not go to.
So the way the batteries work, so the key sort of throttle point is the infrastructure that the array sits within. So the service community is the people that are connected to the wires on the street. So that power that's generated at the array needs to get distributed. Now, it will be distributed, at least in part, to the grid. The grid has a certain capacity. So one of the very first things the developers do is they submit to National Grid, or they submit to whoever the utility company is. Here's our project. How much can the network take? And then they say, okay, so in this case, we're designed for 5 megawatts, let's say. The utility will say, well, the current network that you're connecting to, where you're going to interconnect, can't take it. We need to upgrade it, or we need to do this. So there is a ceiling to what you can put to the grid. Now, yeah, as you can well imagine, you produce energy differently during the day. So at noontime, you're producing way more energy. Nobody designs their facilities so that midday production matches what you can put to the grid. There's always a certain amount of sort of optimizing. The way batteries work is batteries allow you to store all of that. So instead of just trying to match up your production to what the grid can take, it says I'm going to produce as much as I can so that I can feed the grid that maximum amount all day long. And that's why batteries are so integral to a lot of these. That's why they're actually required in Massachusetts. They're very expensive, but they pay themselves back. So in this case, batteries are there to do one thing. They're there to distribute the load, the energy that you're making to the grid below the thresholds that the grid has. It's been represented with that those batteries are for just peak loading for the facility. Well, this is not an off the grid facility. It's going to have an electrical connection. Their peaks will be met by the grid. So it's the power is going to be there. We're not in the middle of Alaska.
So the buildings are fed by the utilities company's grid. They're not getting their power directly from the batteries.
Well, we don't know because they haven't provided a one-line diagram and they haven't described their metering situation. So there could be, right? It could be that the power goes to the grid and the entire facility is behind the meter, for lack of a better word. So the facility gets all their power before anything goes to the grid. I don't know if that's their proposal.
Sean, that's the way it was described.
Well,
The term behind the meter, right? Was that it?
a lot of things have been described and a lot of things have been said. a lot of stuff that is sort of,
How do you interpret behind the meter? Is that when the facility gets the energy first?
correct, but it's still just a random term. What matters is show us the one-line diagram that shows exactly how the system is being metered. For example, we've asked the question about your interconnect. Your interconnect has a single pad, doesn't show any pole-mounted switchgear, doesn't show any pole-mounted meters, doesn't show any of that stuff. So we're still unsure how you're interconnecting. Originally, you had an interconnect at both sides of the facility, so we don't understand how you're interconnecting. So it would be great to understand all that detail, but it's part of the whole discussion.
Chris, did we ever get the interconnection agreement?
No.
Okay, so can you provide that? The interconnection agreement?
I don't know that there is.
There would have to be.
I think there is.
Yeah, it has to be. There would have been an interconnection agreed, there would have been a study done to make sure that the solar
Yeah.
could come on the road, and then there'll be an agreement with.
I mean, I don't know for sure, but I believe
It would have to be.
there should, yeah.
Just a quick question. Excuse me. As I understand it, once we close this meeting, or we close this application, we cannot accept any further information, meaning a landscape plan or the information about the solar, so.
Or the building height,
Pardon me?
or the building height, which is pretty
Right,
important.
right.
Yeah.
So the applicant had stated to Leanne that he wanted to
Potentially close tonight.
potentially close tonight, but that's not happening. You
Well-
have 2 weeks to supply this information. Other than that, I don't know where we're going.
Isn't, as in a court case, the record could be left open for submission of these follow-up materials?
No, this is a public hearing.
Pardon?
This is a public hearing. If it's
I
closed.
understand that.
No, once it's closed, it's closed. Pursuant to the open meeting law. Pursuant to 48, section 11. Once it's closed, it's closed. We're not taking any evidence.
So your extension, as it stands now, is
Till May 27th.
till May 27th. So you've got as soon as possible to get that information to us and anything else you can supply that Sean was looking for in his information. And we really don't want it at 5 o'clock on the 27th. You understand?
You would have to.
All right, any other questions, comments?
It would just be to close.
Kevin, do you have any other questions or comments, or Amy?
Again, I guess I'm also very, very concerned about the lack of site plan, the lack of what's going on this site plan. Again, they're asking us to design this project, which never ends up well, never.
We
So,
want to be there.
you know, we're gonna start moving around buildings, we're gonna start moving around parking spaces, we're gonna require green space, we're gonna require a courtyard. I don't know about you guys, but probably when I'm done and I put in all the recreation facilities that I want and the green space that I wanna see, I can guarantee you there probably won't be enough parking, or there won't be enough, you know, or maybe units will have to be cut, who knows? But you can't ask us to design that.
So in lieu of a new plan showing, let's say, the recreational across the road, you're recommending that we don't use a condition to require that because it kind of isn't going to work properly.
I mean, again, it's a risk that the applicant is taking. The risk that they're taking is once the hearing is closed, we have 40 days to deliberate amongst ourselves.
Right.
And if we want to see some of these things that we've talked about, we have to start redesigning the project through conditions.
And in essence, they've got 2 weeks to
If they
provide
can,
that.
yeah, I mean, if they have to, it's all, the ball's in their court. If they want to redesign it.
It's tough to ask us to approve a project, to vote for a project if we don't even have a final plan.
Correct.
You know, and that, I mean, we brought it up, and I think you've got a pretty good idea of some of the things that we've asked for. I mean, I'd like to see, you know, a courtyard between the 6 buildings, And if you wanna move some of that parking to where the playground and that other outlying building is, you can move some of the parking over there, then move that building, move the playground, move the pool area, and move the clubhouse to the other side of the road. And the question is, can you produce a plan showing all that? Because that's likely to be the conditions that you may see.
That presents a question for this side of the table. Because, no, we're not asking you to redesign or redesign our applicants, our clients' plans. What we're trying to say is that we've submitted a plan that we believe respects all the discussion that's been had and the goals that have been discussed here.
But you did say earlier that the applicant was amenable to moving those on the other side of the road. And what we're asking is if he's amenable to it, let's see it on the plan.
Because, well,
I don't remember him being amenable to that.
yeah.
Earlier in this meeting, he said he.
Well, I know, but I,
The last
the last
meeting.
meeting.
The last meeting, I think, when that issue was brought up, I believe their consultant indicated that that's something that they could do.
I know, but I didn't think the developer was interested in doing that. It could be done, but I didn't
I
think it
thought that
was.
was a statement that was made by Mr. Cleary.
I think it was that under a condition, they would have no objection to doing it.
But our counsel is saying that's not the way it's gonna work. We wanna see a plan. We don't wanna condition it because that's not our job.
Yeah. Oh, I heard Amy. I disagree. And we've got that line. Where is the break line between the requirement for preliminary plans and your request now?
Oh, the line is clear, that is clear. When you're talking a preliminary plan, you're showing the location of buildings, you're showing the location of parking, you're showing your landscaping, your screening, your recreation facilities. You're not showing the interior, you're not showing construction schematics, you're not showing any of that. But you don't come in with a plan and say, if you guys want to change, do whatever you want to this plan, you guys can go ahead and do it. And there's suggestions being made by this board, and you're saying, well, those sound fine, but you guys have to make those changes. That's not a preliminary plan. What you have is you've submitted a preliminary plan, and if we go with that, that's what we have. We also do not have heights of buildings, so we're going to condition the buildings to be 10 feet high. How many units do you lose then? I mean, this is what you're looking at. I'm not going to tell you how to represent your client or how to design a project or how to be a developer, but it's dangerous to have this board have to do the designing for you.
And it's not as if some of these suggestions are coming up at the last minute. These
Correct.
suggestions were made quite some time ago. In fact, getting rid of all that concrete in the middle of all these buildings, which you mentioned in the first public hearing that we had.
All right, any other questions from, or comments from the board?
Just
May I make sure of what it is we're talking about? Because, yes, we're bringing this to a completion. This is the first time Deb and I are sitting here without the clients present, and I just want to make sure we get it right. We'll do it one more time.
I mean, I don't know whether the rest of the board agrees with me or not, and if they don't, they can
I understand.
nix, and say, no, that's not necessary, but I think it would be preferred, at least from my perspective, that you have a courtyard of green space, landscaping, benches where the residents of the community can congregate if they want to congregate between the 6 buildings that you show up there. You eliminate the concrete and the parking that's between the buildings. You move the 3-story building that's closest to Route 130, and you move the playground that is close to the.
Excuse me, can you say that again regarding? The building,
See that building, the three-story building?
right,
That's close to, very close to that abutting parcel, and is the closest building to Route 130. The building that's parallel to Route
yep.
130?
Oh, I see.
Yeah, move that to the other side of the street.
But there's no room over there for that.
You had duplexes on the other side of the street. What are you talking about? There's no room. You move that building to the other side of the street.
So you can do it. Okay.
Move that building to the other side of the street, you move the playground to the other side of the street, move the pool area to the other side of the street, you move the clubhouse to the other side of the street. Then you can take those 31 parking spaces that you see there between building number 2 and building number 7, and you can move that parking to where the playground in that 3-story building was on this prior plan. I mean, I don't know whether everybody's agrees with me or not. I mean, feel free to speak up.
No, I agree with you, Kevin.
Definitely a better plan.
And Amy had brought up a landscape plan by a licensed architect, signed off
Yeah.
on the barrier.
That much, a new landscape plan, we don't feel is essential at this time.
Well, to Amy's
We've
point, we're
shown
not designers.
on the plan,
What plan? Where's the plan?
the new plan that you're talking about, on the revised site plan for next time.
I don't see any landscaping on that plan.
Now, there's a separate plan in the package described as titled landscape.
I got a site plan, overall site plan, grading and drainage plan.
I can confirm there is a landscape plan, but it doesn't have tree species identified, it doesn't have
Right.
any of the detail at a
It
minimum
has-
you'd expect.
It has the spaces for landscaping described,
Okay,
and the final plans can be done by a landscape architect.
okay, here's the landscape plan. You've got a wall here, and you've got what appear to be some shrubbery. But it would seem to me that you ought to have a row of arborvitae all along that common property line with the abutter that provides screening. And this landscape plan only shows the landscaping going as far as the end of the parking lot aside building number 2. Am I correct?
I'm sure you're correct. No doubt.
Yeah, and the fence stops there, sir.
Right, so it's,
So there's no screening of any of these buildings along the entire.
other than the fact that this is lower, at a lower elevation.
But you got 3-story buildings there, so
Yeah,
you're not
yeah.
screening those
But
buildings.
if you put landscape in front of that wall, you're gonna screen the wall, you'd have to have 100-foot high, you know what I mean, like.
I'm not saying that the buildings have to be invisible.
Okay.
But, I mean, you could do something to break up the.
Understood, yes.
What we could do is just show the spaces for it, show a little detail.
Driveway.
So again, anything else, Amy?
So, right now, from what I have, we need, again, we need the heights of the buildings. We need
That's
the,
what we could do.
we need the additional information on the 4 tasks. We need the interconnection agreement.
And can you add one-line diagram as well?
No, I have that, actually. We have the one-line diagram. Then we have the fire department comments on the below-grade parking. I think from what I heard from Deb, all we really need on that is confirmation that she can address those comments.
And I think the biggest one would be the circulation.
Yeah.
All the other ones are more of a mechanical nature.
It would be very atypical to not show the parking layout of a
Oh, yeah,
underground.
sure. Yeah,
And I think, and that is, besides the plan changes that Mr. Crane already discussed, that's all I have on my list right now.
And just one thing, so counsel for the applicant has unequivocally stated they will provide the financial data. Is there any way, what criteria do we have to meet to access that?
They have to claim that any condition that we're considering is, will make the project uneconomic. And once they make that claim, then there's a whole set of regulations that kick in that allow you to review the pro forma. It allows you to hire a peer review to review the pro forma.
So that wouldn't happen until after we issue the permit?
No, it wouldn't happen, it only would happen if before the hearing is closed, we state that we're gonna issue some kind of condition that would make it uneconomical. So,
So it'd be a deliberate act that we've said we will make it
yeah,
uneconomical?
and so essentially the regulations make it very hard for you to look, to see the pro forma.
Okay.
However, once we get back this information on the 4 tasks of the solar, I think we really need to look at that because Attorney Fitch stated that the solar is part of the 40B, so the solar is subject to the profit cap on 40B. So we are gonna have to come up with conditions that do not allow that solar, do not allow them to make more than 20% off of that solar, meaning, and that would include all of their tax subsidies that you get through solar, things like that. So there's gonna have to be significant financial accounting with regard to the solar. So I'm gonna contact Mass Housing again about the solar to see how they've done that in the past.
Because they're the ones that keep track of that, not the town, right?
Correct, but we have to make sure because of the fact that, or we would limit the solar, we would limit the panels. We would reduce the solar field because it still doesn't sound like, the math adds up.
You have something, Jason?
Can I ask Amy just one thing that was a concern of mine, the traffic solution, if that is we'll say, I guess, past design that's proposed for that term, how do we get to a point where we know that the traffic plan, both vehicle and pedestrian, is aligned with what's being proposed, and to your point, Sean, is truly vetted, and you mentioned the challenges with the lot.
Right.
The lots that are impacted aren't currently in the plans. Like, how do we get over those hurdles to make sure that, one, we have an accurate traffic plan and turning, like, is this actually functional or not?
Right.
One, and then two, I don't know if, conditions with respect to those adjacent parcels, like, are there administrative steps that need to be taken to make sure that any potential roadway adjustments are?
Yeah, so I would imagine that in town you have qualified people that can review sort of roadway improvement projects, but it would have to be designed by a transportation engineer, stamped by a transportation engineer. All of the land required to affect the improvements would need to be acquired. You could even condition your approval that they couldn't start work until that work was completed, so that the left-turn pocket was constructed before you allowed a building permit. So there's an infinite number of ways you can assure that the work gets done properly. The fortunate thing is it's fairly narrow design. There's not much latitude when you're designing roadway improvements because there's highway standards, there's AASHTO standards. So nobody's going to put a stamp on a bad roadway design.
Okay.
So you can be rest assured. But what can happen is you can find yourself in a situation where, well, you've released building permits and these buildings are being built, and then all of a sudden, they lose interest in building a left turn lane, and you've sort of already cast that die. I think Amy will do a great job of making sure your conditions are strong and that you create all these prerequisites before any building permits get issued, so that before you go down the path of building something, all this stuff is in place.
Did we get a recommendation either from you, Sean, or from the town's highway department that there is a need for a left-hand turn lane and perhaps a deceleration lane on the right-hand side of heading off Cape?
Yeah, I don't, we got kind of a murky response when, as it relates to the left turn lanes and things like that. And we're still waiting for responses on crash analysis. I understand there were 2 crashes that resulted in fatalities nearby that still hadn't been addressed.
You have a highway engineer, or traffic engineer on your staff. Did they looked at this and?
Yeah, our first letter, the last 14 or 20 comments were all from our traffic people.
And
Yes.
I can't recall, did that call for a left-hand turn lane and a deceleration lane on the off-Cape side of it?
So there was no analysis done for it as part of the original application, so our comment was do what's called a warrant analysis. Then the response came back that it triggered the warrants, but marginally, and we said, well, no, there is no such thing as marginally. It's either one's required or not. They never answered that question. What happened was the left turn lane from 2014 just showed up on the plan. No description, no explanation, it just showed up on the plan.
So there is a left-hand turn lane on the plans that we have.
Correct, yeah. A left-hand turn lane entering the site from
Entering the
130,
site.
yes.
I mean, the deceleration may not be as critical on the right-hand side of the road.
Usually not, it's a pretty straight section of roadway. And you're not, usually for the decel lane, usually you're traveling at a higher speed and.
And the line of sight was okay.
The line of sight crosses over the abutting parcel, so that's part of the real estate issues that need to be addressed before any solution could get built out.
So just for clarification on that, I did speak with the developer, and as stated, the parcels in question are in common ownership, and they said that they would be happy to provide a site distance easement on those properties, and we would add that to the plan.
So we have that as a condition, Amy, and so that's taken care of.
I would suggest any easements you need for the construction and for the site distance be added to the plans, so that they show on the plans.
Okay, thanks. Good, everybody good for the moment? Would any member of the public have any new or would like to speak to this permit tonight? Yes, sir, can you just state your name and your address?
My name is Louis Benito. I live at 13 Wellfield Road. I just have one question. What are the consequences, if any, if you do not get the information you want by the 27th? And the reason why I'm asking is there's been a history of you not getting what you've requested. We've been to several of these meetings and the same thing has come up over and over. Yes. What happens, especially if this is the last meeting?
Well, that's when we vote,
Okay.
so a vote will take place.
And what will that determine? You vote on?
Well, I guess we have the option of, and we'll have to talk to Amy about it, but we'd have the option of imposing certain conditions on the project or denying the project. But be
My
mindful.
understanding is if you deny the project, it means nothing because it's a 40B.
Well, you're probably right, because generally speaking, any project that goes before the Housing Appeals Committee gets approved. So what we're trying to do is come up with the best possible alternative, best possible plan that satisfies the board and we think is a positive for the town.
Right, I understand.
When you don't have enough affordable housing in your community, there's not a lot of leeway. They don't have to comply with local zoning or anything of that nature. So it's a very difficult to actually, you can always deny it, but it's very difficult to have that stand up.
To make it stick, right, I understand.
Yes, ma'am.
Shouldn't we have the name and address of the owner-operator of the microgrid?
I don't know.
You asked for it.
Oh, yeah, ma'am, what was your name and address? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, Lynn Cormier, Forest Inn,
What street?
Old Snake Pond.
It's typically part of the interconnection agreement.
Okay, we will be getting that. We will be getting that. Yes, sir.
Joe Silva from 30P Avenue Drive. I'm a little confused about the open space, the green space, which the town requires. But isn't that developer to figure out that and not the board to give recommendations how to do that? So who's designed what, the plan? So I was a little confused with that gentleman proposing to go across the street and all that. And I thought it was them to figure out all that.
The first plan that we got showed nothing but buildings and concrete. So what we're asking for is to have a green area, a courtyard.
Right.
And that's within our purview to ask for that. The town's bylaw, for all practical purposes, is meaningless in many respects. Because a 40B project, if the town does not have enough affordable housing in the town, the developer does not have to comply with the local zoning requirements.
Yeah.
So we have the ability through this process to require certain things. And even what we're suggesting doesn't meet the town's requirements, because the town requires, I think, 30% of the site has to be left in its natural state, if my memory serves me correctly. You know, and that's not gonna happen, and doesn't exist because a lot of the site has already been cleared. So what we're trying to do is is within the whole process, and given the constraints that the whole affordable 40B process provides, try to come up with a plan and make recommendations to the developer that they take certain action that we think would improve this plan overall.
And I agree with you, but so you recommend the open space and the green, but then you go beyond that to help them how to lay out the plan to go across the street. That's why I was a little confused. You require the open space and the green, yes, but then I thought that's the engineer to figure out.
Well, the only way they can provide the open space is to move that stuff on the other side of that internal roadway.
You don't have a whole lot of options.
Thank
It's an
you.
internal street, it's not as if they're moving it across from 130.
No, they own land, yes. Thank you.
Anybody else have, yes, sir, what's your name and address?
My name's Don Clay, 7 Park Road. I've got property down in the Pimlico Pines area, which is kind of downgrade from this
Right,
development.
you submitted that letter.
So I did submit the letter. First of all, I want to thank the board for the efforts you're putting in here. It's giving you time to take care of all this, and you've been asking some great questions, and I want to commend you. This isn't the type of project that the Board of Appeals normally gets. It usually goes to the planning department. So you've done a great job, and I thank you for all your good questions. What I would like to just comment a little bit about my letter is the prior development that was in there was a large residential development, very dense. And the town had enough forethought to put some open space in there and has some conservation land in with that, because it is a dense area. This is a dense project. Now there's a piece of property, 52 Pimlico Pond Road, is still owned. It's separated from this unit through an AR that you're familiar with. The property is still owned by Roman and Stenson, and it's really conserves the land around the pond and the infrastructure in that area, in the watershed. I don't think it would be beyond the board's purview to condition an approval, if that was the way things were to go, that land remained in conservation moving forward to prevent future development, which would make this area even more dense and more overpopulated from what it is now, cause potential issues. So it's just something I would hope you would consider if you were moving that direction. I know your choices are limited. You can approve with conditions, or you can deny for insufficient information, and I don't know which way you're going. Approve with conditions is usually the way these things go. But I think Amy can help you with some of that. You've got great peer reviewers, you've got great counsel, so I just hope you consider protecting some more of the environment before clear cutting everything up there and changing the ecosystem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
That's you. Yeah, okay, I didn't know if there was anyone that had a hand up behind me. Yeah, I was just gonna ask Leanne if she has, okay, great. Chris Dennis, 7 Epson Drive, in Sandwich. And I just want to start by saying I completely agree with Dawn. I mean, this site has a total of 64 acres that the two owners own. And right now, they're trying to develop just this 9 acres in the solar field. And I completely agree that if a condition could be put upon the developers to put that parcel that is the closest to Peters Pond, I believe it's over 22 acres, into conservation as a part of this whole thing, seeing as how much land is going to be deforested. And I mean, we're talking like 33 acres of land being deforested, and it's going to have a huge impact on a lot of factors. But if for some reason the developer is not willing to put that adjacent land into conservation, and a refusal like that to me is just another pointer towards their real intention to develop this entire 64-acre site, which if they do would require a MEPA review, which is Mass Environmental Policy Act. Over the past 5 years, there's stark evidence from the applicant to develop this site beyond this permit application. And I believe that is why this developer will not put anything across that road that this board keeps requesting them to do. This has been like month after month after month, and they don't come up with any plans to expand it because they have future ideas for the rest of this site. Is my belief. And if you look, even their current drawing plans, Amy, sorry, Leanne, if you could scroll on my letter. The current plans that they submitted, right there, the current plans they submitted last fall, they had those curb cuts. And when questioned about those curb cuts as to future development and really pressed on it, then they removed the curb cuts. And then if you go down a little bit further, there was a, at one of the hearings, I believe Mr. Killian questioned the development of the land out near Peters Pond, that the 22 acres closest to that. And he said, are you not going to develop it in perpetuity or just for the foreseeable future? And they replied, well, for the foreseeable future. So that left that open. If you can see the Google map of 2009 imagery, that's what the site looked like. And Leanne, if you scroll a little bit. Okay, this is what the site looks like today. And it's not just the access road that they've taken upon themselves to cut in, but there are 2 more access roads, which are for the Sandwich Green development that they put a PEL in for in 2022. And the interesting thing about that PEL that was submitted for Sandwich Green in 2022 is it was denied because of the scale of that solar field. That was a 40B application that was denied because they felt that the solar was more than ancillary to the project. That was a side note there, but if you scroll down a little bit, that's the Sandwich Green development next to the water that particular PEL was denied. And if you scroll up one more, okay, here's the final build out. This is actually their slide of the final build out. The tan dark brown is all the buildings. You've got the solar, you've got additional buildings up front. I believe, like you said, we're talking about something that needs a MEPA review because that is segmentation. This permit application would just be the first phase. And if this is gonna happen, this isn't fair to the town, traffic, environmental. This is why MEPA exists. As it states in the MEPA documents, quote, proponents of any project may not phase or segment a project in order to evade a MEPA review. I think this board needs to assume that a large-scale final build-out is happening unless the applicant can prove to them otherwise. Our time and environment is just too important to miss these red flags, and I see them as red flags. So thank you.
Do I have anyone else that would like to speak or make a comment this evening? Does the board have any more questions, or Jonathan, you're clear on what Amy's looking for, and Sean?
I sure hope so.
Okay. All right. Leanne, any comments from you?
So just wondering, are we gonna be granted another extension or? No. So, May 27th is, our last date for the 180 days to make it, to close the public hearing. Will all 5 board members be available on May 27th?
Yes. Well, wait a minute, but that's Tuesday, right? Yeah, I may be a few minutes late, but I'll be here.
Yes, it's the Tuesday after Memorial Day. We do have 4 other applications that night, so we may have to think about potentially moving some.
You might have to just open it, because I'm... Okay.
So then it would just be a continuation until May 27th.
All right, would someone like to make a motion to continue public hearing number 24-15 Village Green till May 27th at 6 o'clock?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone. That's it for this evening.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Deb. Board members of the board, we just have, does anyone have any requests for comment? Does anybody have any comment on their A's and A's?
A&R, right?
Subdivision.
Subdivision. A&R, yeah.
All right, we have nothing to deliberate. Someone want to make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Such a piece.
Why?